it's Jennifer from the blog The Everyday Farmhouse. Today we're going to be making goat milk soap. Now this is my attempt at a copycat recipe of Dr. Squatch deep sea goat milk soap. A reader had asked me to try to copycat the recipe, and so this is my attempt at doing that. I think it comes pretty close. It's a really great bar of soap, super nice on your skin. I'm going to give you a couple options with this as far as ingredients. You could use water, you could use goat milk, you can use cow's milk. I've tried it both ways. This batch I actually made with cow's milk. It turned out beautifully. I didn't have access to goat milk. We have kept goats in the past, but we have found that we're not goat people. So maybe I'm not going to make any friends with that statement, but I don't like goats. So the best thing I could find, I asked a soap maker friend of mine, and she said when she needed to source goat milk around here that she just used powdered goat's milk. And so that's what I did for this next batch that I made, and it turned out really well too. So you can get this at Walmart or anywhere like that, a grocery store. The other things you're going to need are, I try to use organic ingredients whenever I can source them. Some of this came from Sam's Club, some of it came from Amazon. I get my sodium hydroxide from Nurture Soap. I really like getting it from them. It's easy to work with. They're fast with shipping, so I like to use that. I get my olive oil and coconut oil from Sam's Club. They're both organic. I usually use lard in my soap recipes because we raise pigs. It's affordable, it's accessible, but I've had some complaints of people not wanting to use lard in their soap. You can substitute palm oil almost interchangeably with lard. So for this recipe, I formulated it, and always if you make a change in a soap recipe, run it through a lye calculator. But palm oil and lard both have very similar fatty acids, so their chains are very similar, but you still have to adjust the lye somewhat. So this recipe that I'm sharing with you, we're using palm oil, and I'll show you how you can adjust that also if you prefer to use lard. So we'll be using palm oil, olive oil, coconut oil, a little bit of shea butter. This is a 5% super fat soap. So we're using shea butter, so the goat milk. For the grit on this, it's not nearly as gritty as the pine tar Dr. Squatch soap that we made. This just has some oats. And the way I do this, you can buy colloidal oats, or I just use a little handy chopper. You could use a coffee grinder, blender, something like that, and I grind my oats up in that to make it so that it's fine enough that it's not just clumps of oats going down your drain or whatever from using the soap. As far as tools, you'll need a digital scale, you'll need an immersion blender, a spatula, and of course you'll need some bowls and measuring cups and that sort of thing as well. So that's the materials you need to get started. Those are the materials, and I'm going to show you step by step how to make this soap. Okay, so when I recorded this video, I had made 3 batches of soap. This was my 3rd batch, and I made a couple mistakes on this 3rd batch that I didn't realize until I went to test the soap, and I realized the fragrance wasn't as strong, and I had missed the step of mixing the kale and clay with the fragrance oil, and then I'll just kind of rinse that out with a little bit of water. I missed recording that step. I didn't have enough ingredients to do a whole other recording, so I thought I would just make note of that. I also neglected to put the sea salt in with the, you mix the sea salt in when you add your lye. You do that before you add it to the frozen milk. And so I neglected to do those 2 steps in the recording of this. So I'll make note of that as I talk you through the steps as well. But you just won't physically see me doing that in the video, and the recipe will be written out as well, so it should be easy to follow. And just I just want to note that adding the clay does make a difference. It really makes the fragrance much stronger and lasts longer in the bar of soap. So anyway, it's a step worth taking if you want a strong and long-lasting fragrance in your soap. All right, let's get started. Okay, to start, I'm going to melt down the harder butters, the coconut oil, the shea butter, and the palm oil. I'm not going to heat the olive oil. I'm just going to melt these down, and the temperature is going to be a little higher than I want, so I'll add the olive oil in at the end to kind of cool that down. You want your lye solution and your oils to be within 10 to 15 degrees of each other. And overall, I'm soaping at a lower temperature so that the milk doesn't scorch. So I'm going to start off with frozen milk just to keep that temperature down overall. Next, I'm going to measure out my sodium hydroxide. Make sure you wear your safety protection. And I like to wear rubber gloves too, just so I don't burn my hands. And long sleeves are always a good idea when you're making soap as well. So I like to measure my sodium hydroxide using a digital scale. And I just use a glass jar. And you always want to put it on the scale and tear it out. I always measure everything in separate containers. I know friends that just measure it all into one container and tear it out every time. I get too distracted. I make too many mistakes. And so I just measure mine separately into different containers. And so once I measure out my lye, I'm going to mix it with the frozen milk. This is the first step that I missed was adding the salt, and this is where I would add the salt in right before I poured in the sodium hydroxide. And what you'll note, and that just helps to make a harder bar of soap. I like to use sea salt. Then next, you're going to pour in your sodium hydroxide over those ice cubes, and you'll see as I stir it that the ice cubes of milk begin to melt. You're going to continue to stir this until it's a solution, until there's no clumps of lye, there's no ice left. It's all melted down nice and smooth. All right, so I like to, before I combine, check the temperatures and make sure that they're right within 10 to 15 degrees of each other. I was soaping at a lower temperature overall. I believe I kept this around 90, 95 degrees rather than the usual over 100 degrees. And that's just, you want to keep it low so that your milk doesn't scorch. The milk really makes it heat up more. So I always try to get the air bubbles out before I start mixing with my immersion blender. And you're just going to checking the temperature one more time, and you're going to pour that lye solution into the oils and begin to mix, and you're going to mix until it comes to trace. So you're going to pour your lye solution into your melted oils, and using an immersion blender, you're going to mix this up until it starts to come to a light trace. Once you've gotten it to a light trace, this is where you're going to add your fragrance oil. And of course, as I stated, I neglected to mix the fragrance oil with the kaolin clay. Also, the way I poured it in here was not ideal. You should mix it around some. As you can see, it kind of starts to make the fat become solid. So anyway, don't do what I did. Do what I say, right? So mix it with the kaolin clay, and then you can mix a little bit of water in with that to make sure you get every bit of it. And add that in. You're also at this point going to add in your ground up oats, which add nourishing properties to the bar of soap, and a little bit of grit, which is just a really nice addition to this soap. Once you get to a nice thick trace, you're going to pour this into your mold. And I like to take a skewer and kind of go back and forth through the soap to pack it down into the mold and then also make the top look really pretty. I also don't have that recorded, but I'll pop a picture in here to show you what I mean by that. It really gives the soap a nice surface. Okay, after you've got it poured into your mold and you've run your skewer through it to make the top look nice, you're going to cover it with parchment paper and just pop the whole thing in the freezer. What that does is as the milk and the oils and the lye go through this saponification process, the milk tends to heat the whole thing up. And so we skip gel phase for this soap, stick it in the freezer, and then take it out after 12 to 24 hours and cut it into bars. Let it cure for 4 to 6 weeks, and then enjoy your soap.